Okay, welcome to the Parsha class, Parshat Acharei 5784. Today's class, we're going to have some fundamental Jewish ideas about demonology and about Eretz Yisrael and about lots of other important things. The Parsha itself, quick summary, very easy to summarize, probably in two sentences. The beginning of the Parsha basically deals with the service of Yom Kippur, very familiar parsha for those who've heard the Torah reading on Yom Kippur. And the end of the parsha deals with kashrut and sexual immorality and the other kinds of ways that a person, as Rav Hirsch would explain, suffocates his own freedom of will by becoming tied to their own desires. And so, with no further ado, let's get right into sharing the source sheet. And we'll try to go sort of in order. And like I said, it's going to be a real doozy of a class today. We're going to go all around Jewish thought today. We'll start with, like I said, towards the beginning, chapter 16, verse 2. Hashem tells Moshe to tell his brother Aaron, Al yavo b'chol eit el hakodesh. Don't go at any time into the Holy of Holies. Meveit hafarochet al ponei hakaporet. That's in front of the curtain. Asher al Aharon lo yamut, and don't go there with where the ark is, because otherwise you could die. Because I have a cloud, I will appear in a cloud over the cover when I want you to come there. Meaning, in other words, that only on Yom Kippur should a Kohen go there, and only through this entire ceremony as is described in the Torah. Now, what's interesting is that the only time that a Kohen can go there? So aside from the times that maybe they could go there to clean things up, to maintain it, etc., for actual sacrificial reasons or reasons of going to the Beit HaMikdash in order to actually perform the service there, for that you need to go through, you need to wait for Yom Kippur to go into the Holy of Holies. However, Yaakov Kamenetsky quotes the Vilna Gaon as saying, he says, I'll just quote it directly because it's almost too hard to believe. Shamati omrim b'shem hagra. I heard them say in the name of the Vilna Gaon. And there's a footnote there too, and in the actual book of the Emet Yaakov, there's some sources, other places where, again, this is quoted not directly from him. As many of you may or may not know, the Vilna Gaon never actually wrote anything of his on his own. His students wrote all of the Torah that we know from him. But again, he says, I heard it said in his name, quoting the Vilna Gaon, She'im haya Aharon makriv kol zdoro shel Yom HaKippurim. If Aharon goes through the whole system of Yom Kippur, if he does all of the things that as we're going to learn, all the things that need to be done on the Yom Kippur sacrifice and all the whole process, hayamuter lo likanes kol yimot hashana lifnei ulifnim. So he can go anytime he wants to the inner sanctuary, into the Kodesh HaKodashim, to the Holy of Holies. Or Aaron could go anytime as long as he went through this procedure first. Rak the Kohen Gadol Shavio Acharav, it's only the Kohen Gadol who came after him, who Asur Likanes Sham Bishar Yimot Hashana B'chol Ofen. It's something special about Aaron. Aaron being the first Kohen Gadol, being the father of all Kohanim. So there's something special about him. Ohev Shalom Rohev Shalom. He loved peace. He pursued peace, as we learn in Pirkei Avot. And not only that, but he had this zrizut. He was always anxious to do the mitzvot perfectly. He never waned in his enthusiasm. So Aharon was a special, unique person. And for Aharon could go anytime he wanted to the Beit HaMikdash and into the Kodesh HaKadoshim. He did not have to wait for Yom Kippur like all other Kohanim would have to do to go. The holiest person can only go to the holiest place on the holiest day of the year. But not Aharon. Aharon could go anytime he wanted to, according to the Vilna Gaon. Says Rav Yaakov, there's a proof to this idea in a Gemara that we've quoted also in this class not so long ago. You could also maybe prove this from what it says in the Gemara in Gittin. What does it say? There are 8 pieces of Torah that had to be given on the day that the Mishkan was erected, on the first day of the Mishkan. Because the Mishkan, when it was built, once it was completed, once it was being used, certain halachot came into effect immediately. And people needed to know what to do. So one of those halachot is Parshat Acharei. This parsha that we're learning now about what a Kohen has to do to go into the Kodesh HaKadoshim. Now you could ask, as Rav Yaakov is basically implying, now wait a minute. The Mishkan was completed in Nisan, right before Pesach. 6 months later or so is when Yom Kippur is going to be. So it's not so relevant. You didn't have to teach me this halacha right now, did you? But maybe you did. Because maybe the halacha needed to be known right now, because Aharon needed to know now that he could go in at any time. For other Kohanim, true. But for Aharon in that generation, he could go into the Kodesh HaKadoshim at any time that he wanted to. So it's just a fascinating new perspective of how we view Aharon and how we view Yom Kippur itself. In a sense, Aharon had a Yom Kippur anytime he needed it. That he could go into the Beit HaMikdash, into the Kodesh HaKadoshim at any time. It's not true. That's not. Don't take that idea and apply it to yourselves somehow and say, "Oh, I'm like Aharon too. He's holy. I'm holy. We can all have Yom Kippur anytime we want to." Yes, you can always do tshuva, but the same kind of tshuva is not available for everybody. All right. Let's skip along a little bit. Next chapter 17, verse 7, Yud Zayin Zayin, and here we're talking about the Parak Yud Zayin begins the halachot of the Isser of eating blood and injecting animals at will. And not seemingly not being careful about what happens to the blood, etc. All the halachot of that, covering the blood of wild animals, all of that is in this parsha. But then the verse 7 says, you should do all this, v'lo yizbuchu od et zivchechem l's'irim, and you will no longer bring sacrifices to the Se'irim, which is a reference to demons, actually. That you would otherwise be joining with Hukat Olam Tiyazot Laham Ladorotam. And this should be an everlasting decree for all of your generations. So forever and ever, you're not going to eat blood. Why can't you eat blood? Because you shouldn't have anything to do with the demons that you would otherwise be attached to. What demons are we talking about? How are we attached to them? Do we believe in demons? What's going on here? So there are a number of answers, of course, but this piece of Sforno is fundamental to our understanding of Judaism. See, the thing is about the Sforno is that usually his comments are short, sweet, to the point, maybe a little poetic and flowery, but usually very short. If there's a long piece of Sforno, that's a good indication that he's trying to explain something much deeper than usual, and it requires a little bit more concentration. But this is a long piece of Sforno. We're going to do our best to try to understand it. And it goes a little something like this. This would be a rule for you for all generations. What's the rule? Not to sacrifice to demons. What? You need to tell me that? Yeah, I can't do avodah zarah. I can't worship idols already. I know. I can't worship anything except Hashem. I know. So what's this? Why would I think that it's okay to have these dealings with these demons? So afal pi shelo hayu mekablim otam leloka. So even though these people who were sacrificing, making dealings with demons, were not doing it for purely religious reasons, they weren't trading in God for these demons. Why? B'shum panim, aval hayu chafatzim b'chavertam. They only wanted to befriend them. Liyot hashedim lahem, meshartim, mesaimim, measkehem. They wanted these demons to serve them. They wanted to have a demon around so they can, send them out for pizza, or it's good to have a demon that helps with your Pesach cleaning. Right? These demons are helpful. You don't want them as your God. You just want you're looking for an easy babysitter. Oh, I see you're out tonight. Where are the kids? Oh, they're at home being watched by the demon. Normal stuff. That's why the wanted to attach themselves to demons. By the way, in case you're not sure, he makes it very clear that the rabbis mention. They mention Al Yosef Sheda. There's a demon by the name of Yosef. Al Sheda Shechazam Shisiach Bei Rav Ashi. There's some demon who was always hanging around the house of Rav Ashi. Amnam Bedavar Hashedim Asher Lo Niskara Briotam Rui Lehitbonen Bahem Zal Ruyim Mazikim. The rabbis of the Talmud would identify these demons and would call them mazikim. Mazikim are damages. These kiru, shehem, ochlim, mishotim, parim, merabim, umeitim. They're really living things. These are not like angels. Angels don't eat, they don't sleep, they don't procreate. These guys, these shadim, these demons, they're ochlim, they ate, shotim, they drank, parim, merabim, they had babies, meitim, they died. Right? They're like living. They're like regular creatures, like some sort of animal. But if they're able to do this, but they're invisible, we have a problem, because what could they possibly be eating if they're invisible? Na'adre b'mara b'yotem ochlim v'shotim haya v'hechrach mizonam atzam. That's a murkav dak ma'od. So since they are basically very as he calls it, murkav, very thin, very like, if they're invisible, they're obviously barely physical, barely visible. So whatever they ate had to be absorbed by them, had to also be very, very thin. And what's that? He says, Ota Eid Hadam, Asher Mimenu Yithava Ruach Nozu Lekoach Lechayuni. So what he says is, and this is possibly based, but as Forna was a this Forna was a doctor, a medieval doctor. And so some of his ideas are based on the scientific knowledge they had at that time. So what he says is that that these demons, they had to also, since they're so thin and so barely physical, they also had to eat something that was thin and barely physical. And what's that? That is blood, or not just blood, but really the what would you call it? Sort of like the mist of blood. Blood has this. I guess they had this understanding that blood had a sort of like, I guess maybe even odor. So that's what the demons would eat. V'zeh hakoach b'naso bo hu nefesh achai. That's what it says, that life, the nefesh, it comes through, our lives come through this nefesh, through this life force, and that's what's found in the blood, kasher hu chai, and that is alive. ובחיות שזה הכוח לא יהיה בלתי, זה הנושא יקרא, זה הנושא לפעמיים נפש, and sometimes that's why something that's alive is called a nefesh. Ka'amru ki hadam hu nefesh, as it says in the verse. He quotes the verse now in the Devarim. The life, blood is life. Dam hu nefesh. Right. Mazon l'shedim, and that's what gives nourishment to these demons. Hine makriv lahem dam asher bo zeh be'etzem she'ein koach biyadam lahakachto. And if you give them that blood, that feeds them, and then they befriend you because they don't have the strength to get that stuff themselves. How are they supposed to get to the blood? They have no power. They're very, very thin. They're very, very weak, and it's only because of our giving them blood that they're able to survive, and that's how they become friends. Kibidei hatzayir, chitim kael, mani leitlan rushuta, lemishakel minei ikana avatam. They become your friends. V'ochlu yikana mizag nota litvaam v'yavo chaverto. Right, so they you create a sort of kinship with them by feeding them this one thing that they need to survive. So basically, you're giving them blood, they become your friend, and then they do your bidding. וכאשר היו רבים חפצים וחברת השדים ועבדת כדי שיסיהו בשגתם בהשגת הערב בלתי מועיל אשר תאותו נקנת לאכילת עץ ודעת, הוא משיגים דם למנחה לשדים. So this is why we're so serious about this idea of not eating blood, because it's similar to the sin of eating from the fruit of in Gan Eden, the fruit of knowledge, which was really meant to have a similar effect. In other words, we weren't supposed to eat from it because it in a sense it had a well, that's interesting. Some of the commentators say this aid that we're talking about, this mist of blood, is perhaps the oxygen that's carried to the tissues by hemoglobin. All right, so there's even modern explanations of this scientific idea that the that the Sforno had. Either way, so the idea of these, of befriending these demons, is not because you're worshiping them, not because you want them to be holy or anything like that. It's all about them making your life a little easier, which is also kind of the problem with eating of the tree of knowledge that began many of our problems, and therefore we don't do it, and that's why the punishment for doing it is so great. Eating blood is punishable by karet, similar to death, which is what the punishment was for eating from the tree of knowledge. Let's skip a little bit. There's not much to skip. We're almost at the end here. And that's why the Chazal called these things mazikim, that they cause injury. They're mazik. They hurt. The idea being that the befriending them is not a good idea, and to avoid our befriending them, that's why eating blood has been forbidden, and why it's a rule for all generations to come. It's not just for no reason that we have such rules. There are rules that are sometimes deeper and more mystical, and things that we don't really experience nowadays. Now, if you ask me, Rabbi, what's going on? What are these demons? We don't have demons. I've never seen a demon in my life. I mean, besides, maybe on a college campus. So I remember hearing once Rabbi Victor Miller, at the end of his lectures, he would give a Q&A. He was once asked why we don't see demons anymore nowadays. So he said it's interesting that the Gemara has a similar question in the Talmud 1,500 years ago. Asked the question why, throughout Tanakh, you see left and right, you see people talking to angels. There's angels here, there's angels there. Angels visit Avraham, angels visit Lot, angels rescue Hagar, and there's angels everywhere. Bilam sees an angel. Why don't we see angels today? The Gemara asked 1,500 years ago. And the answer they gave is, we're not on the level anymore. By the time of the Talmud already, we weren't on the level anymore to see angels. And I don't know if that means we would what would happen to us. Maybe we'd go crazy. Maybe we wouldn't believe it. Maybe we would I don't know. Maybe it would be antithetical. Maybe we'd worship the angels instead of H-Shem. All kinds of things. We're not holding there anymore. We're not on that level anymore. So now it says Victor Miller, now 1,500 years later, now we're asking the question about the Talmud, and the Talmud left and right. We had already here, we had demons hanging out of Rav Ashi's house, and demons, being used as messengers, as a cleaning crew or whatever. Why don't we see demons today? We're not on the level of the Talmud anymore. We just keep going down and down levels. We're going to get further and further. Eventually, we're going to ask, why aren't we on the level to breathe air anymore, or whatever? You know what I'm saying? Like the next question we ask, well, why don't we see the righteous anymore? God forbid. Baruch Hashem, we always have. Every generation has its righteous. Yeah, but you see what I'm trying to say. All right. So that's the Sforno. Again, that's available in your source sheet if you want to read. If you want to read it in English, we have it there as well. Okay, from Sefaria for whatever you think of their translation. All right, let's skip along a little bit further. Still chapter 17, still on the concept of eating blood. So the verse says, "Ish ish mibnei Yisrael min hagar b'tovcham," and from whether it's a Jewish person or whether it's convert to Judaism, doesn't matter in the slightest. Either way, b'tovcham asher yatzud tzayid, somebody who traps an animal, chaya or oaf, whether it's a wild animal or whether it's a bird, asher yachel v'shafach et damo. If he shechts it, he's going to have to pour out the blood and cover it with earth. Now, what's interesting is the Torah never says anything about shechita, about slaughtering. We know that it's an important halacha. There is an argument whether it's from the Torah or not, even though it doesn't mention it explicitly in the verse. There are definitely references to an animal being slaughtered, right, and the karbanot, etc. And so, or whether there's also a question of whether shechita is just a consequence of the fact that we have laws about not causing undue harm to animals, tsar balei chaim. So to avoid giving an animal unnecessary harm, perhaps that's another reason for shechita, which slaughters an animal. Obviously, there's some pain involved, of course, but there's as little pain as possible, since the first thing that gets cut in the shechita process is the nerve that feels that kind of pain. So as soon as you finish off that nerve, the rest of the pain should go more smoothly. Also, it's done quickly with an extra sharp knife, etc. There are rules about all of this. This is just not the time for it. Either way, though, the Ibn Ezra wants to know what is with this rule about covering up blood? Why do we cover up blood? So he says, "V'gam mizeh hakatuv nilmod." So first of all, he points out that we're talking about whether it doesn't matter if it's a born Jew or a convert that comes to our land, Chazir Osuf or Of Adoras. Doesn't matter if he's gonna if this person is coming to our land and he's eating all kinds of animals that don't belong there, whether it's a pig or a horse or a non-kosher bird, a bird of prey, shehu tame, that they are impure. V'yitken ba'avur shetzave shelo yechal dam v'lo yera dam nishbach chutz mehamizbeach. So they should know that blood isn't supposed to be eaten. Blood is supposed to be used for the sacrifices. When you kill an animal, if it's a kosher animal, it's supposed to be sprinkled. It's supposed to be for a korban, for a sacrifice. And part of the sacrifice is that the Kohen sprinkles that blood, whether around the Aharon or on the kaporet or the parochet. Excuse me. And so blood has a special significance, perhaps alluded to a little bit in what we saw from the Sforno. But once the animal is slaughtered, it needs to be covered. That is still, by the way, the halacha today, that if you shecht an animal, and if it's a wild animal or a bird, you need to take afar, dirt, dust, and cover the blood with that, so that it's not shown. Why? The chasod kol adam, you cover up all the blood. She'enu karav legabe hamizbeach. So you shouldn't think to bring it to the mizbeach. Shelo yachshov haroa b're'otov v'hu dam ayel tzvi or of or zevach nizbach le'avodat kochavim. You shouldn't think to use this blood for any kind of sacrifices for idolatry, or perhaps we can also add from the Sforno, to befriend any demons. So he says that in Parshat Re'eh, he gives the secret to this. The Ibn Ezra was famous for, infamous, according to the Ramban, for giving away Kabbalistic secrets to the uninitiated. And so there is some secret involved in this whole issue of blood. And of course, again, I've been saying it over and over again, but what we learned from the Sforno is not too far off from what the Ibn Ezra says there, and that is that the blood has a certain ability, a certain effects, and that's why you're not allowed to eat it. It can affect you in a negative way, and can even, God forbid, says the Ibn Ezra, he also says it can negatively affect one's children, God forbid. Shouldn't know such things. Okay, we might cut the class a little bit short today. I only have one other thing to share with you, and it's a major piece. It's a long piece, and it's very significant. It is a Ramban that should be learned by everybody, I think, and we don't get too many opportunities to do that. I set aside quite a bit of time in the class today to make sure that we would have all the time we need to really understand, especially nowadays with what's going on and all the tension about the Eretz Israel, about the land of Israel. It's worthwhile to learn exactly what it is we hope for, what it is we're looking at when we think about Eretz Yisrael. So here's the source here, the Ramban. It's on the verse in Vayikra Yud-Chet Chaf-Hey, towards the end of the Parsha, chapter 18, verse 25. Talks about how the nations of the world, the nations that lived in Israel before the Jews got there, the nations of Canaan, so they defiled the land. How did they do that? V'titma ha'aretz v'efkod avona aleha v'takeh ha'aretz et yeshveha. So they permitted this kind of promiscuous behavior, and the land became disgusting. And because of that, because they made the land disgusting, these people were thrown out of the land, not just thrown out, vomited out of the land. All right, taka. All right. So, Hachmir HaKatuv. This verse is tough, says the Ramban. It's coming in, guns ablazing. It's what's Chachmir HaKatuv Ba'arayot, especially with regard to sexual immorality. The Torah is very strict. Ba'avur ha'aretz shetitame bahen v'taki v'nafashot ha'osot. That the land becomes defiled and impure and throws up the people who do these things. V'hine hayra'ed chovat haguf ve'enan tuluyot ha'aretz. But think about it, though. These sins are immoral, okay, sexual, okay, and they're not connected to the land, are they? What does it have to do with the land? They're not land laws. We have plenty of laws about land, giving tzedakah, leket, payah, lots of laws we have. Truma, bechorim. So what does this have to do with the land? About soda davar hakatuv she'amar b'hanchel elyon goyim kule ki chelek Hashem imo. He quotes a verse from towards the end of the Torah. Says the secret here is that Hashem gave all the nations of the land their lands, but Hashem's portion is Amo, his nation. What does that mean? Va'inyan ki Hashem hanichbad bara hakol v'sam koach v'tachtonim ba'elyonim. Hashem created everything, and he created whatever power different things have, whether they're upper things like angels or lower things like mountains or whatever. V'natan al kol am v'am ba'artzotam v'goyim kocha v'mazal. And he gave every single nation its own strengths, their own nature, and their own constellation, their own, call it star or whatever, the combination of stars that represents each nation. Yedua, as is known, kasher noda be'itz tagninot. This is what's called astrology. That's what it means when the Torah says earlier in Devarim that Hashem made all these things, and he the sun and the moon, the stars, and everything in the heavens, and pointed them towards the people. Ki chalak l'chula mezalot b'shanim. And we know, or some people know it more than others. Some people are not convinced that, but it says the Ramban, we know that when you're born has an effect on who you are. This is the whole idea of horoscopes, etc. Real horoscopes, not the ones in the newspaper or something online that lie to you for money. And and he raised these constellations to basically control how people behave, and and uh, and how they do what their nature is going to be. Binyan hakatuv v'sar malchut pras omer negdi. So he quotes another verse in Daniel that the minister, the Tsar, the head of the Persian king, stood up opposite me. He's talking about stars, right? Again, astrology. The constellation of Greece approached. And they're called kings. These angels are called kings, as it says in also in Daniel. Notarti Sham Etzel Malche Pras. That we're next to the king of Persia. All right, all of these are constellations we're talking about. So that's what he gave to all the other nations. V'Hashem hanichbad yitbarach hu Elokei Elokim v'Adonai Adonim lekol ha'olam. And the Hashem, the great name, blessed be He. He is the God of everything. He's the control of the entire world. Aval Eretz Yisrael emtzaud hayishuv He nachlas Hashem miyuchedet lishmo no natan alecha min hamalachim Katzin Shoter Umosha. When it comes to Eretz Yisrael, which is the center of the world somehow, that is Hashem's. And it doesn't have a mazel running it. It doesn't have any angels running it. B'hanchilo ota la'amo mi'ached shemo zera ohavav. And he set it aside to be the inheritance of his great nation. Doesn't have any other rulers, no angels, no nothing. It goes directly from Hashem, and it belongs to the people whom he loves and who love him. That's why it says all the way back in Parshat Yitro, before the Torah was given, that Hashem calls the Jewish people an Am Segula, a special nation. Out of all the nations of the world, all the nations have their own mazalot and everything else, not the Jewish people. Jewish people have Hashem directly. And it says that you will be for me a nation, I will be your God. He's quoting Yirmiyahu. And so because of that, Hashem made the people, these people is Am Segula, holy with these laws, to stay away from arayot, to stay away from these kinds of immoral sins. And these many of the other laws that we have that make us holy. It's a justification for all of the mitzvot, by the way. L'kach amar shamartem et kol chukotai v'lo taki etchem haaretz. That's why it says also in the Torah that you're going to keep my laws, and when you do, you'll be in my land, and my land will not get rid of you. That's just the opposite of this verse. Omar lachem ani atem tirshu et admatam bani etnena lachem lareshet ota ani Hashem Elokechem asher hivdalti etchem min ha'amim. I separated you from the other people. Yomar ki yavdil otam mikol ha'amim asher natan lehem sarim ve'elohim acharim vito lanu et ha'aretz. The other nations can have their angels. The other nations can have their protectors. Not you. You are different, he says to the Jewish people. And for you to be different, lo tisbo of the avodah zaru umegalim arayot. I will not in any way accept you worshiping idols or engaging in sexual immorality. Very nice. Now, what does that have to do with the land? V'haparsha hazot iskiru hamolech liklal avodah zara im zichron harayot. This mention of Molech that we had in a few verses earlier. Im Zichron Hayrod really applies to all kinds of idolatry and sexual immorality. Al kulam amar al titamu b'chol ele ki b'chol ele titamu hagoyim. Don't do any of these things. Don't become tamei through them. Don't become impure through them. That's these things that the other nations have done. Hey, Parsha Hashniya v'Avdel Etchem min ha'amim liyot li. And the next verse it talks about sexual immorality. It says, Hashem says, I separated you to be my people. V'hu chomer asur avodah zara. And again, it points to the fact that avodah zara is a very serious thing. Lakach amar ki mipnei shehem miyuchadim lishmo ba'avur ze natan lahem ha'aretz. I'm only giving them the land because they're special to me. Shenemar v'yomer lachem atem tishu et admatam ani etnena lachem l'dereshet otah ani Hashem Elokechem. That's what it means when it says later on that you are going to inherit the land that I'm giving to you. I'm Hashem your God. Yinei b'chutza ha'aretz, as opposed to outside of Eretz Yisrael. One second. Yeah. As opposed to outside Eretz Yisrael, hine bechutza la'aretz, af al pisha hakol l'shem v'nichbad ein l'tahara ba shlema ba'avur hamishartim v'moshlim aleha, even though everything is under Hashem's purity and never, which obviously Hashem is everywhere, but in some ways those nations are more or less, they've fallen under the rule of these other powers, these secondary powers, the constellations. Say again, obviously made by Hashem. He's the ruler, he's the controller, but it's not direct anymore outside of Israel. And so the people, because they're under their control, they're going to worship them. Sorry, Elohei kol haaretz Acharei. No, so Elokei kol haaretz Acharei. So that's why it says in Yeshayahu that Hashem is going to be called the God of all the world. In other words, that's the whole idea. That whole idea that Hashem's name will be holy is because right now, all over the world, Hashem's name isn't. He's the God of everything. He's the God of even these powers that these other nations are worshiping. So at that time, that's when in the future, when Mashiach comes, that's when Hashem is going to punish these creations of his that sort of took power that really doesn't belong to them. Zehu inyan she'amar b'gzerat irin pivgama arif kedishim ba'alta. So this is a quote from, again, Daniel, that these irin, these angels, they make decrees and people listen to them. Yomar ki hadavar hahu nigzar kol Nebuchadnezzar b'gzerat irim. So that Nebuchadnezzar was listening to angels. Again, these angels took on powers that really don't belong to them. Shugazru al hakochot ne'etzalim mehem la'asot kach. Who gave them these powers? Obviously from Hashem. Vekru irim, and they're called irin. They're called from the word. So irin is like to wake up, right? Ki hatzilotam itoraru hakochot b'kol hapualot. They are able to make sort of like wake up the world. Kamosh Amar ve'elu ir hakodesh min shemaya nachat kara b'chayil. So as the Torah says, also in Daniel, that about this angel that there was a cry. It sounded like the angel was yelling and screaming, and like that sort of woke up Nebuchadnezzar to his prophecy. Momar Kadishim, so he gives other proofs to this. Um, yeah. So basically, as Daniel explains, most important thing here is Zehu Shamar Lo Daniel Gzeret Aleha. This is all Hashem's decree. Ki Hakol Mi'itihu. Everything comes from Hashem. Even what the angels say and what the angels decree. V'hine b'shem Hashem anichbar alokei alokim hachutz la'aretz alokei eretz Yisrael hi nachlat Hashem. So Hashem has power. He's the God of all these powers outside of the land, but in Israel He's in direct control. That's what it means. Acharei alokei necha haaretz ki ha'elohos nichrim be'eretz Hashem. That's what it means that that the people are going to Elohei, that they're going to worship these foreign gods. Whereas in Eretz Yisrael, Hashem is the main God. V'zehu is the God. V'zehu amar lo yadu ki mishpat Elokei haaretz v'yishlach bam et hariyot. Now, if you're tuning in late, or if you're not catching what I'm saying, just a quick wrap up, or at least summary up to this point. Hashem is the only power. Hashem has control over everything. He's the only independent, all-knowing, all-powerful power in the world. Right? He created other things though as well, like angels and other spiritual things, constellations, horoscopes, perhaps. Whatever else he made, those things don't control anything. They seem to. Hashem gave them certain powers to sort of, there's an angel that's making grass grow or whatever. But all of that is from Hashem. These are just like emissaries of His. But in Israel, it becomes a serious thing to not recognize that, for in any way, shape, or form, to feel like that Hashem's dominion is in any way limited. His direct control and power over Eretz Yisrael is completely whole, right? And is obvious in every way. And as it says in Sifra, in the Midrash, Lo taki haaretz etchem, on the verse, don't let the land throw you up, which is like that verse we're going to see in a couple of chapters. Eretz Yisrael einu mish'ar arzot. Eretz Yisrael is not like the other lands of the world. Einu mekayemet ovdei avera. The land does not will not stand for people sinning in it. Misifrei ein imo kel nechar v'lo tehei reshut le'echad misharei umot ha'olam lavo l'shalit bahem. So no other power is with Hashem. Hashem's direct hashgacha is over the land of Israel. And he quotes other teachings of the rabbis that say basically the same idea. It's throughout the rabbinic writings, in the Midrash, in the Sifrei, in the Sifri, in Gemaras, and it's pretty much it's pretty clear that is what the rabbis believe. That again, Hashem is in control of everything. Hashem is for sure the only one God in the entire world. That's a Jewish belief, no question about it. But when it comes down to Eretz Yisrael, that's where it's most felt. outside of Eretz Israel, there's almost a feeling that these constellations, these other powers, have some sort of control over us, and that's not true about Eretz Israel. So he gives lots and lots of different examples. He argues with the Ibn Ezra about this as well, and then at the end he says this, just to wrap up. Towards the top here. V'hinei, first word there. V'hinei hiskir hakatuv. The verse mentions Kianshe Eretz Canaan Anshu Ba'avur Harayot, that the people were being thrown out of the land because of their sexual immorality. Rabbatina Zichronim Livracha Amru Whose Haru Alehem Me'ed Yitzir La'adam V'Lenoach. It says really that this that they knew about this from the time of the creation of the world. This was given to Adam. This was given to Noah. People know instinctively not to do these kinds of things. So otherwise, it wouldn't be fair for Hashem to punish them. Right? You can only have a punishment if you had some more sort of warning. And the fact is, this kind of sexual immorality is intuitive. It's ingrained in us. It's part of our DNA. But the verse doesn't have to mention this warning. The land itself hates this kind of behavior. And it's not only the people of Canaan who were warned about this. The behavior of the people of Mitzrayim. So they also did these kinds of things. The land of Mitzrayim was filled with all kinds of immorality. And the Egyptians weren't thrown out of their land. And the other nations of the world aren't punished this severely for this kind of behavior. But the whole point here is that the land itself is very holy, and it cannot withstand. It cannot allow this kind of immorality. Otherwise, it will throw out. It'll throw up and throw out the people who do these kinds of things, and that's how the land maintains its holiness. It's how it's maintained its holiness throughout the years, and how it will maintain its holiness until the coming of Mashiach b'meira v'yameinu, and onward and upward and throughout the rest of history. Thank you for listening, and have a good rest of your week. Take care.